Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah. Here we're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph. We're coming to the end of Hilchos Berchos HaShachar. I think two more shiurim, including tonight's shir. We'll be learning today Mir Hashem Daf Pei Ches Amud Beis. We started Pei Ches Amud Beis yesterday. Mir Hashem today we'll complete Pei Ches Amud Beis. We're continuing to learn the surprisingly complex halachas of how you're mitzaref a group of people to form a minyan. So we pick up today two lines down in the Shulchan Aruch on Pei Ches Amud Beis. Siman Nun Hey Sif Yud Tes says the Mechaber. Shliach Tzibor Bateva. If the Shliach Tzibor is located at the Teva. Now, you know, a Teva, literally speaking, is a box. Now, you know, usually when we speak of a Teva in the context of tefillah, of davening, we usually refer to the kaddish as the teva, like the Gemara will use a phrase, ha'imid lifnei ha'teva, the shliach tzibur who stands before the kaddish. So that would be referred to as the teva. Now, we don't mean over here that the shliach tzibur is in the teva, meaning that he's in the kaddish, nor do we mean that the shliach tzibur is located in a box. Believe it or not, I did hear some people share on this Amud and say that the Shliach Tzibur is located in a box, but that's not. I do not believe that that's what it means. I believe what it means is if you go into a lot of batei knesiyos, a lot of shuls, especially I think older shuls, but even some more modern shuls. I mean modern as in contemporary. The amud or the bima, usually more the bima than the amud, is located on a raised platform, and it's surrounded by railings or by walls. So I believe what the Mechaber means over here is shliach tzibor bateva. The shliach tzibor is located on the platform that was known as the teva. Now, why would it be known as the teva? Well, maybe the reason it was known as the Teva is because of ha'imid lifnei ha'teva, because the Shliach Tzibur is the one who stands lifnei ha'teva. So, you know, we call the Amud that the Chazan davens from, we call it the Amud, davening for the Amud, right? So we would refer to it as an Amud. The Mechaber referred to it as the Teva. So the Shliach Tzibur is standing by the Teva, which is a raised platform, and it is surrounded by walls. Now, let's harken back to Hilchos Shabbos, to Hilchos Erevin. We know that if you have a platform that's raised, and that platform is Gavoya Yoser Miyud, right? It's 10, certain if it's 10 Amos, but even 10 Tfachim, something that's 10 Tfachim high, right? And it's surrounded by Mechitza, it's a separate Rishus, right? So Shliach Tzibur Bateva, if the Shliach Tzibur is standing by the Teva, technically speaking, he's standing in a separate Rishus. The Tisha Bebeis HaKnesses and 9 other people are in the shul proper. They're on the ground level. They're on the floor level of the shul. So technically, they're not both in the same Rishus. Says the Mechaber Mitztarfen. They are Mitztaref. Af al pi shehi gavoya asara, even though it's more than 10 tefachim high. Urechava arba'a, and it is 4 tefachim wide, so it's got those minimum requirements to be a separate rishus. It's 10 tefachim tall, which in contemporary measurements, approximately 40 inches. So it's approximately 40 inches high, and it's daled al daled. It's 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim. Technically, it's a separate rishus. V'yesh la bechitzos gavayos hasara. Even if it has railings, it has mechitzas surrounding it that are also 10 tefachim tall. So it's really a bona fide separate rishus when it comes to the halachos of rishuyos. Still, says the Mechaber, he's mitztaref with the other members of the congregation to make a minyan. Why? Mipnei shehi betelo legabe beis hakneses. Because this raised bima, while again technically in the halachas of rishuyos, it might technically be considered a separate rishus, the bottom line it is certainly bottle to the rest of the shul. It's a feature of the shul. The Yesh Mishakasav, he does bring down the Yesh Mi, there is one who writes, which in the Berurah this is brought down from the Smak. The one exception would be if this bima would enclosure would have some kind of railings or mechitzas that go all the way up to the ceiling. If they go all the way up to the ceiling, in my mind, I'm thinking about COVID. You know, it's like they got so paranoid about the Baal Koreh and the Baal Musaf that they went and they put up lucite mechitzas all the way up to the roof. If it's surrounded all the way up to the roof, so then yesh bishakasav dani mili kishedi mechitzas megis l'tikus agag. But if it goes all the way up to the ceiling, then you can't be mitzdarf. Okay, let's take a look here in the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is cutting on test. Shleat Tzibor Bateva. The Shleat Tzibor is in this bima or amud enclosure. Hu adin acher. It doesn't have to be the Shleat Tzibor. This is not a din in the Shleat Tzibor. That because we did have a din previously. We learned in Sif Tezvav on Peches and Aleph. We learned about a case where if some people are outside and some people are inside, and the Shleat Tzibor is in the middle, so then the Shleat Tzibor serves to combine everybody because everybody's focused on the Shleat Tzibor. Over here, the Mishnah Berurah is telling me this halacha of Sif Yud Tes is not a halacha in the Shleat Tzibor. Whoever is standing in that teva enclosure is mitzdaref with the rest of the minyan. Who are dinacher de mitzdaref? The nachat Shleat Tzibor. Why does the Mechaber say the Shleat Tzibor? The loynema, so that you should not say the kevad shu tzarich lahitzion yidei chayvasan migragara. The Chavetz Chaim says there's actually a svara to say that if the Shleat Tzibor is in the teva, that's worse than if somebody else is in the teva. Somebody else who's in the bima enclosure, yeah, he could be mitzdaref with the rest of the minyan. But maybe if the Shleat Tzibor is in the bima enclosure, we might need him to be moitzi the tzibor in a bracha. Maybe he can't be in the teva. Kamash B'lan, no. Even the Shleat Tzibor could be in the teva. It's interesting. You see, the Chavetz Chaim, you know, very often we don't have a proper appreciation of the material that we're reading. Let's remember that when we learn the Shulchan Aruch, we're learning the words of Rabbi Yosef Kairoi. We're learning the words of somebody who had a chavrusa shaf with Eliyahu Hanavi. Right? We're not talking about, you know, a peer. Or we're not talking about one of the gedolim of this dar. We're not talking about one of the gedolim of the previous dar. We're talking about Rabbi Yosef Kairoi. We're talking about the Mechaber. So it might have been tempting to look at Sif Yud Tes and say, okay, you want to know why the Mechaber said Shleat Tzibor? Because that's the Milsa Deshchicha. Who is usually standing by the teva? The one who's usually standing by the teva is the Shleat Tzibor. That's why he said Shleat Tzibor. Chavetz Chaim recognized and appreciated that these are the words of the Mechaber. And you have to look and you have to say to yourself, why did the Mechaber say Shliach Tzibor? And the Chavetz Chaim discerned a chidush in Shliach Tzibor. The chidush is, you might have thought that the Shliach Tzibor is actually worse because we need him to be moitzi the tzibur. So maybe, yes, a regular person could be by the teva, and he could be mitzdaref to make the minyan. But the Shleat Tzibor, to be moitzi the rabbin yidei chayvasan from the teva, maybe that's a problem. Kamash B'lan, no, it's not. I always say this, especially when you learn Gemara, or you learn Chumash, and you learn the Rashi. Rashi was the master wordsmith. Rashi did not write anything for nothing. If Rashi wrote L'kamon mefarish b'Gemara, it's because he realized that when you learn the Mishnah, you're going to have an instant question. And Rashi didn't want you to waste time being bothered by the question, so he said, don't worry about it. L'kamon mefarish b'Gemara, the Gemara is going to explain it. And therefore, if you learn a Mishnah, and you learn Rashi, and Rashi says L'kamon mefarish b'Gemara, it behooves you to stop in your tracks and say, wait a second. That means that there's an instant kasha over here. Why don't I have an instant kasha? Do I see something that's instantly shver? If not, you're missing the boat. You got to realize there's something instantly shver here that made Rashi write L'kamon mefarish b'Gemara, because Rashi did not pick up that pen and write a single ois for nothing. Okay, now we go to Sif Chaf. Says the Mechaber, Hayu asara b'makom echad. If you already have a minyan, okay, till now we're talking about being mitzdarif a group of 10 to form a minyan. Now, says the Mechaber, Hayu asara b'makom echad. You have 10 people in one place. V'oimrim kaddish kedushah. Since there's a minyan, they're saying dvarim shebekdusha. So they're saying kaddish, they're saying kedusha. Says the Mechaber, Afilu mi she'enoi imahem, even somebody who's situated in a place where he cannot be mitzdarif with those 10. So, let's give you a very simple example. Somebody is walking outside the shul, and there isn't a window where he could see inside, and they could see him, and he could see them. So it's not royan zezeh. So he's outside the shul, he's in a separate rishus, it's not royan zezeh, and he hears kedushah, or he hears kaddish. What's the din? You're not allowed to just say kedushah just azoi. You're not even allowed to just answer amen just azoi. Depends to what, but amen to a bracha is if you answer amen and you're not really answering to a bracha, it's an amen yisayma. The Gemara in Brachas says very not nice things about somebody who says an amen yisayma. So it's not so pashut. In order to say a davar shebekdusha, you need a minyan. In order to answer to a davar shebekdusha, somehow you have to have a connection to the minyan where the davar shebekdusha is being said. Maybe, right? So this person is walking outside the shul. He's disconnected from the minyan. It's not royan zezeh. Is he allowed to answer? Says the Mechaber, Hayu asar b'makom echad v'oimrim kaddish kedushah. If there is a minyan, so they're saying dvarim shebekdusha, right? Oh, my mic was slid all the way over to the side, but you probably were able to hear anyway. So there is a minyan, and they were saying dvarim shebekdusha. Afilu mi she'enoi imahem, even somebody who's not mitzdarif with that minyan, Yachal la'anois is able to answer to the dvarim shebekdusha. Okay, let's take a look before we see the second opinion over here. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah on the beginning of this sif. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cotton samach. She'eno imayim ritzayna loymar. What the Mechaber wants to say is afilu hu bebayis acher. Even if he's not just outside, he's in a totally different house. He's in a totally different building. Rachayt l'kamri. He's far away. He's definitely removed from the tzibur. But the shliach tzibur's got a really, really, really loud voice, so he hears him. Shekeva, he's allowed to answer. Why? Fascinating. Fascinating. What the Chavetz Chaim says. What the reason for this halacha is, why you're allowed to answer. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Shekevan she'asara heim b'makom echad, because since you have 10 in one place where the dvarim shebekdusha are being said, Shechina shruya beinayim. The Shechina is over there. You have 10 Yidden over there, so the Shechina is there. That's why they're saying dvarim shebekdusha. Va'oz, once the Shechina is located somewhere, afilu mechitza shel barzel, even the iron curtain. You know, those my age, we remember the Iron Curtain. Talk to kids nowadays, they don't even know what the Iron Curtain was. The Soviet Union, what's that? Va'oz, afilu mechitza shel barzel, even an iron curtain, eina mafsekes, cannot separate bein kol mi sheroitza letzarif atzmai, between anybody who wants to join himself im aviv shabashamayim, with his father in Shamayim, the Rabbeinu Shalom, hashoichen b'soich elu ha'asar. Once we have a group of 10, and now by virtue of that group of 10, the Shechina is there. If you're walking outside and you want to join with that tzibur, you want to join with the Shechina, the Rabbeinu Shalom says, what? Brick walls are going to stop you from joining with the Shechina? You're a Yid. You're a B'nai Avram Yitzchak V'Yaakov. You want to join with the Shechina? You have a license. You could join with the Shechina whenever you want. No walls, even an iron wall, is not going to separate you. That's not the same as being mitzdarif with 9 other people to be able to bring the Shechina. If you want to form a minyan so that the Shechina should come, you have to be able to combine with the group to make the quorum of 10 so that the Shechina will come. But once the Shechina is by that 10, you want to join the Shechina to say dvarim shebekdusha? nothing will stop you. So the answer is yes. Now, there's a lot of practical ramifications to this. You're davening in a contemporary shul, where you're one of these shuls that like are a minion factory, right? So you have a room over here where there's a minion. You have a room over there where there's a minion. You have a room over there where there's a minion. These are totally separate rooms. You can't, sometimes it's not Ryan Zez, there's no windows into the other room, but you hear Chazar Sashatz. Maybe you're learning in one room. You're sitting and you're learning the daf in one room, and in the next room, there's a minion going on, and you hear Chazar Sashatz. Could you answer Amen Yeshmei Rabbah? Yes, you can. They have a minion that's saying Amen Yeshmei Rabbah. You can answer Amen Yeshmei Rabbah. You hear Baruch Hu. Could you answer Baruch Hu? Yes, you could answer Baruch Hu. Because you could answer Dvarim Shebekdusha. Baruch Hu might be a little bit of a question. Let's see. I said you could say Baruch Hu. Let's see. Now, let's take a look here at Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Samach Aleph, which is very interesting. Yochel Lanois. Says the Mishnah Berurah, he says Baruch Hu. Yachalanis, you could answer Amen, V'Amen Yeheshmei Rabbah, U kedushah, U Baruch Hu. So you could answer Amen to kaddish. You could answer Baruch Hu. You could answer kedushah. You could answer Amen Yeheshmei Rabbah. V'chein, and similarly, Yachal Lahoitzia Yedei Chayvasai Batfila Yemeino Baki. Let's say you're not a Baki. You don't know how to daven Shemona Esrei, and you need the Shliach Tzibur to be moitzi you. Now, in our days, the Shliach Tzibur doesn't really have kavanah to be moitzi people. So really, nowadays, if you needed the Shliach Tzibur to be moitzi you, you would have to ask the Shliach Tzibur to be moitzi you. But you could be yoitze with the brachas of the Shliach Tzibur, even if you're in a separate room, because nothing stops you from joining with that Tzibur. They have a minyan, you could join with that Tzibur, even from the other room. Fascinating. Now, there's a very interesting Dirshu footnote over here. Dirshu footnote number 75. If you notice the lashon of the Mechaber, let's be medayik in the lashon of the Mechaber. The Mechaber said, "Hayu asara b'makom echad v'armim kaddish kedusha afilu mi she'ena imahem yachal la'anos." What does yachal mean? Yachal la'anos means he's able to answer. Okay, he's able to. He's allowed to. Is he mechuyev to? Now that has also great ramifications. Because again, let's use the example that I gave before. You're sitting in a room in the shul and you're trying to learn the daf. You're trying to chazer Dirshu Mishnah Berurah. And meantime, the same chazar sashat's next door. And if you have to say amen, 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 it's very disturbing. Now let's also remember, you can't just answer amen. If you can answer amen to the bracha, you have to have kavanah on the bracha. You're not allowed to answer amen without kavanah. So if you want to answer amen to the bracha, you have to be paying attention. You have to know which bracha they're saying. So if you're trying to learn the daf next door to a minyan, first you're going to get interrupted with Berchas HaShachar, right? Amen, 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 amen. Then you're going to get interrupted with Chatzi Kaddish before Baruch. Then you're going to get interrupted with Baruch. Then you're going to get interrupted with the brachas of Berchas Kriyishma. And then there's going to come Chazar Sashatz. So here you are trying to learn the daf, and you can't learn the daf because of these constant interruptions. So the question becomes, when the Mechaber says Yochai Lanois, you're able to answer. You're able to, but are you mechuyev to? Or could you say, I'm not listening, I don't want to answer? So it seems to be a machlokes hapaiskim. Let's take a look here in Dirshu footnote number 75. Mashma, the implication of the words of the Mechaber is, she'ein choyva lanois amen kedusha baruch hu v'kaddish. It's not a chiyuv. If you want to ignore it, you can. Elo shemisha roitze mitztarafu loisam asara. If somebody wants, he can be mitztaref. Maybe this person, for whatever reason, davened b'yechidus this morning, and he wasn't yoitze. He's afraid he's not going to be yoitze his chiyuv to hear 7 kadeshim and to hear kedushah. So he wants to be mitztaref. Okay, you want to be mitztaref, you can be mitztaref, but you're not mechuyev to. V'chein hoichiach hagoyin Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach said Tzadik B'Kadosh Levracha Taka. He was machriya this way, that you're not mechuyev. And he brings this miloshen HaShulchan Aruch shekasav Yochel Lanois. He brings it from the Mechaber who says Yochel Lanois. You can, but you're not mechuyev to. V'loi kasav chayav Lanois. He doesn't say you're mechuyev to. V'chein hoira hagoyin Rabbi Yosef Shalom al Yashiv. Rabbi Yashiv Zatzal also passed in this way, that you're not mechuyev to. Now, interesting, me'idach, on the other hand, hagoyin Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal, hevi b'shem Chazon Ish, the Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal brought from the Chazon Ish, shehu chiyev, that you're chayev to answer. V'chein hevi mishmoi b'sefer Ma'aseh Ish. V'al rayis hagoyin Reb Shlomo Zalman Arbach Zatzal Hanal, and what did the Chazon Ish do with Reb Shlomo Zalman's deal in the Mechaber? That the Mechaber says Yochal Anis. Kosav Agrach Kanievsky, Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal wrote, the Mechaber says Yochal Anis, you can. Well, guess what? If you can, you're chayiv. That's the way Reb Chaim learned. Memela chayiv lanis. The Chaim Kosav B'Shal Zechuvas Nishmas Kol Chai Shechayiv lanis afilu im Shemeh Minyan Acher. Then you hear from another minyan, you have to answer. So the Shalos Teshuvas Nishmas Kol Chai writes that you should be careful not to daven in a room where there's another minyan going on in the next room and you could hear from one room to the next, because your whole davening is going to get mavulbul. You're trying to daven Psukei Zimra. Meantime, in the next room, the davening Chazaras HaShatz. Now you're going to have shilas, what can I answer, what can't I answer? Baruch Hu Rishmai, I can't answer. In the middle of Psukei Zimra. Amen, I could answer. Ben HaProkim, Emtza HaProkim. Then you get into Birkas Kriyishma. So, he says, avoid these shilas and don't daven in a room. However, who am I to say anything with these big names? I'm not going to be Machnis Roshi Bain Haram Halalu. I would stick my head and stick my neck out between Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Reb Yosef Shalom al Yashiv, and the Chazon Ish. But I don't know. I'll ask my Rebbe Reb Reuven Badal Chaim. I'll ask Reb Reuven Feinstein Shlita. So I'll sein gesund and stark if he knows from his father, from the Yeshiva Zatzal, from Rav Moshe. But it libi noikfi. It seems to me that if somebody is sitting and learning, and it's going to be mavalbal his learning, especially somebody, let's say somebody who has to go out to work, he has a precious hour in the morning to sit and learn, and now the Amen Yeshpei Rabbas, the kedushahs, the kaddishim that are coming from next door are going to be mavalbal his learning. It's just hard for me to hear that he would be mechuyev to answer. He brings this down, Tak, I didn't see this. In the third paragraph of the Dirshu footnote here, he brings down from Rav Vosner Zatzal. It says over here, V'em oimid b'tfila, if you're in the middle of davening, b'bokim shemutar lo'lanei samein. So you're holding a Psukei Zimra where you're allowed to say Amen. V'shemei bracha she'ena shayches loy. And you hear a bracha that's not negaya to you. You're in the middle of davening Psukei Zimra. Kegoy misha mavarich brachas hashachar. So you're hearing from the next minyan brachas. And you're standing in your minyan and you're davening Psukei Zimra. V'anias Amen tevalbol oisay mitfilasay. And if you're going to have to answer now to each of the brachas hashachar amen, it's going to destroy your Psukei Zimra. Oy be'es halimud, or you're sitting and learning v'tatrid oisay milimudai, and these amens are going to interrupt your learning. Kosav b'shavas t'shuva shevet alevi, Rav Vosner Zatzal writes shaloi yaneh, that you should not answer. So here you see, this is libi noikfi for sure. It would be very hard for me to say that you should interrupt your learning and you should disturb your learning to be able to answer Amen to Brachas HaShachar coming from the next room when you're not davening. So I think you could definitely follow over here. Now we see you have from Rav Vosner, Beferish, he writes it this way. Okay. Weiter. Now let's go to another opinion that the Mechaber brings down over here. Let's go back into Sif Chaf. So we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down in the Mechaber. The last word on the line. The Yesh Oimrim. The Mechaber brings down a Yesh Oimrim. This is the Ria Buhav, who brings it down, it seems, from Yerushalmi. Yeah. He says, the Yesh Oimrim, Shetzarech Shalo Yehi Mafsik Tinuf oy akum. Very interesting. Brings down an opinion that what did we say the svara over here is? We said the svara is if there's a minyan, so there's a group of 10 where shchina shruya beinayim, where the shchina is already by them, and therefore they're saying dvarim shebekdusha. If you walk by, even if you're in a separate rishus, you can be mitzdaref with them because even a mechitza shel barzel can't stop you from being mitzdaref with the shchina. But this Yesh Ibrim says there is something that can prevent you from joining with the shchina. And you know what that is? That's a mokum mitunif, a filthy place. Let's say between you and where the minyan is, there's excrement. So we know that in a place where there's excrement, in a mokum mitunif, you're not allowed to say dvarim shebekdusha. So you know what this is sort of reminiscent of? We know that if you go into the Beis HaKisei, if you're wearing tefillin, and you took off your tefillin, and you went to the Beis HaKisei, when you come out of the Beis HaKisei, you want to put your tefillin back on, you have to make a new bracha. Why? Because you went into the Beis HaKisei, you went into a makom where you're not allowed to wear tefillin. So that makes a hefsek. So too over here. There's a minyan over there where there's the shchina. Then in between you and that minyan, there's a makom mitunif. A makom mitunif, the shchina is not going to be shoira in a makom mitunif. And then there's you. You can't join with the minyan because between you and the minyan, there's a place that's not roi for hashras hashchina. That's what this Yesh Ibrim says over here. And he mentions a makom mitunif, oy akum, or avodas kechavim. Now we're going to see, very interesting what the Mishnah Berurah is going to say avodas kechavim means. Let's see Mishnah Berurah is cut in Samach Beis. The Yesh Ibrim shetzarich. There are those that say that it has to be that there is not a makom mitunif or avodas kechavim between you and that minyan. So first, the Chavetz Chaim is medayik in the lashon of the Mechaber, and he says midakasav shulchan aruch din zeh b'lashon v'yesh Ibrim. From the fact that the Mechaber writes over here, v'yesh Ibrim, there is one who says, or there are those that say, mashba de din zeh loy psikale. The implication is that the Mechaber doesn't paskin that way. V'chein mashma me haramah b'siman ayin tes sif aleph b'hagah. It's also mashma this way from a Ramah later on in Siman ayin tes, that the Ramah didn't hold of this. U'kebosha kasav ha-Magen Avram sham, like the Magen Avram writes over there in Siman ayin tes. V'ayin b'chayadam, the Chavetz Chaim says, take a look at the chayadam shekasav, he writes, the nira loy, the amen yehesh be'rabu kedusha yana. That amen yehesh be'rabu and kedusha, you should answer, even if there's a makom mitunif or avodas kechavim between you and the minyan. To have Iraq psukim. Because when you say amen yesh be'rabu, you say kedusha. So what's kedusha? Kedusha is psukim. Right? So, okay, so you'll answer amen, not a big deal. Avo baruch hu lo yana, but baruch hu you shouldn't answer, because baruch hu you have to say the shem Hashem. Vayin b'levushei srad. Okay. Az kan samach gibel shalo yehei, va'afilo amen eni yakalanis l'dei azu im hu mafsik. And according to this opinion, you wouldn't be allowed to answer amen to a bracha either. And the svara for that is, since this makom mitunif or the avodas kechavim is separating you from the makom minyan, then you're disconnected from them. And if you answer amen to a bracha, it's an amen yisayma. Ois kat and samach dal tinuf a makom mitunif ritzayna loymar. What the Mechaber wants to say is, and this is again, the Chavetz Chaim discerns a chidush in the Mechaber. What's the Mechaber saying? The Mechaber is questioning this halacha. There's a minyan over there in one rishus. You're over here in a different rishus. You want to answer to the dvarim shebekdusha that the tzibur over there in that rishus is saying, even though you're not combining with them, right? Because you're in a separate rishus and it's not royin zeh. We're questioning this halacha. We have a Yesh Ibrim that says, the first opinion, the Mechaber said, yes, you can answer. The Yesh Ibrim says, no, you cannot answer. Why? Because since there's a makom mitunif or avodas kechavim between you and them, that makes a disconnection between you and them. Thinks the Chavetz Chaim, he says, wait a second. If you're located nearby to a makom mitunif, if you're standing in a place where there's excrement, you're not allowed to answer to a davar shebekdusha anyway. Why? Because you're in the presence of excrement. So you're not allowed to say dvarim shebekdusha. So what's the chiddush over here that of the Yesh Ibrim that, since there's a makom metunif, you're disconnected from the minyan. If you're nearby a makom metunif, you're not allowed to answer anyway. Explains the Chavetz Chaim, no. There's a case where you would be allowed to answer. There's a case where the makom metunif would not prevent you from saying the davar shebekdusha, but it still prevents you from answering because it makes a separation between you and them. What's that? If the makom metunif is situated far enough away from you so that really you would be allowed to answer, but it's still between you and them. Says the Chavetz Chaim inside over here in Samach Dalet, Ritzayin Loimar. What the Mechaber wants to say is, Afilu hu meruchik mimenu yoser miyarba amos. Even if the excrement is situated more than 4 amos away from you. The ba'alma mutter al yedei achzaras panav. So as far as you saying the davar shebekdusha, you would be allowed to turn your head away from the excrement. It's 4 amos away from you. You turn aside. Imeinu megiel leharech ra. As long as you don't, perceive a bad odor coming from the excrement, so there's no bad odor, you're 4 amos away, and you turned your head aside. So as far as you're concerned, you're allowed to answer. But v'hacha ain't a mile. But in our case, it's not going to help you to answer. But the Yesh Ayrim says, still in all, you can't answer because you're disconnected from the 10 that make the tzibur. Hu masik bein hashchina, it's making a separation between you and the shchina. The garim la shchina she'en ashara bakan, so then the shchina is not by you, and you can't answer. Ois cut and samachei. This Yesh Ayrim said that there are 2 things that could make a separation: a makom metunuf, tinuf, and akum. Akum is avodas kechavim, right? Idol worship. Actually, literally, oved kechavim means somebody who serves the stars. This was a reference to those who worshipped the stars, the mazolos, maybe the shemesh and the areach, as deities, right? So they were called ovdei kechavim. And idol worship, or the worship of foreign deities, was called avodas kechavim. So that's what akum stands for. It says in the Mishnah Berurah, Ritzayin Loimar, avodas kechavim, either a false deity, oved kechavim, or a person who is an oved kechavim. So, what could separate between you and the minyan? Avodas kechavim. Let's say I don't want to use a trying to be discreet here. I don't want to use the word, the English word that we generally use nowadays for a base avodas kechavim, because it's questionable whether or not that's really called avodas kechavim, right? But if there would be real avodas kechavim, right? There's a temple where they worship idols. There's a temple where they worship, really worship foreign gods. So that makes a separation between you and the Shekhinah. Or if there's a real idol worshiper between you and the minyan, he also forms a separation between you and the Shekhinah, because the Shekhinah is not going to be shayra on him. Okay. Now we go to Sif Chaf Aleph. Very, very interesting halacha here. Right? Hard to imagine nowadays. But where I live, it's not so hard to imagine, because I remember the years where in my community there was no minyan during the summer months. We had to import people to make a minyan. Says the Mechaber, Ir she'ein ba el asara. There's a city. Interesting, we call it a city. Well, maybe it's a large metropolis of vastly, predominantly Einam Yehudim. But Ir she'ein ba el asara. There's a city that only has 10 Yidden. Community with only 10 Yidden. They have a minyan mitzumtzum. And one of them wants to leave for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. They want to go to their parents for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Or maybe he got a job to be a chazan somewhere for Yom Naraim. So this community only has 10 Yidden. And guess what? One of them wants to leave for Yom Naraim and leave the community without a minyan for Yom Naraim. Says the Mechaber, not so quick. Mechayvin oisai lisha'er. You're either mechayiv him to stay. Tell him, nope, buddy, you can't leave. Or he has to hire somebody to come to the town to make the minyan. Fascinating. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Samach Vav. Bim Kaimai. He has to hire somebody to stand in for him. Why? Shekevan sheminig b'chol tfutzais Yisrael. Since it is the widespread minig throughout Klal Yisrael, that afilu oisam she'en lehem minyan shalom kol hashana, that even in places where they do not have a minyan for the rest of the year, soicher lehem echad shnayim, they hire one or two people b'yamim noraim for the yom noram to come to the community to make a minyan, oy holchim l'makam a minyan, or they all leave and disband to go to a place where there is a minyan. Harei zeh doimeh lo sefer Torah ubeis hakneses. This gets the din of a sefer Torah or a shul shebnei oir kaifin zeh ezeh, where the members of the community can obligate each other to chip in for the cost of a sefer Torah in a shul. You have a Jewish community and they need a shul and they need a sefer Torah for kriyas HaTorah. So guess what? You can make a communal tax and you tax everybody and everybody's obligated to chip in and join, because that is amongst the most basic requirements of a Jewish community. And guess what? A minyan for Yomim Noraim rises to the same level. So you're one of 10, you can't leave. You want to leave? Fine. Pay somebody to come make out the minyan. That's it. Says the Mishnah Berurah, says the Mechaber Vayter. 3 lines from the bottom, near the beginning of the line. Let's say it's a community that doesn't have 10. It's a community that has 11. Ve'emehem achad asar. Let's say the community has 11 Yidden. Ve'roitzim lotzei shnayim. And 2 of them want to leave. Now, if 2 of them want to leave, maybe one will say, well, I decided first that I want to leave, so I'm not breaking the minyan. The next one says, well, I'm not breaking the minyan. Without me, there would be a minyan. There's only no minyan because he's not going. So they each try to be matche, onto somebody else. Says the Mechaber, we're not having it. If the community has 11 members, and 2 of them want to go away for Yom Noraim, Yaskiru Shnehem. So these 2 have to get together. Yaskiru Shnehem Echad. The 2 of them have to hire one person to come form the minyan. B'shutvis. B'mkaimam. They have to hire one person, because the community, they don't have to hire 2. They're not mechuyev to leave the community with 11, but they are mechuyev to leave the community with 10. So the 2 of them have to get together b'shutvis, and they have to hire somebody to replace them. U'shneihem yifru b'shaveh, and they will split the cost equally. Now, before we go to the next phrase, which is a little complicated, let's see Mishnah Berurah is cut in Samach Zayin. Achad also v'roitzim. If the community has 11 and 2 want to leave, says the Chavetz Chaim, v'huadim shneim asar. The same halacha would apply if the community has 12, v'roitzim shloisha latzes, and 3 want to leave, which would leave the community with a broken minyan. It would leave them with 9. So then the 3 that want to leave would have to get together and hire one person to make the minyan. Oy shloisha asar. Or if the community has 13, v'roitzim arba latzes, and 4 want to leave. In all of these cases, tzrichim kulam liskar echad b'shutvis. The group that wants to leave would have to get together and hire somebody to take their place and make sure that they leave the community with a minyan. Now, says the Chavetz Chaim, an interesting thing. You see, whenever we get into situations like this, where there is a cost, there's an expense that has to be borne by the tzibur on behalf of the tzibur, we always have a question of how that expense should be doled out. Should the expense be doled out equally? So let's say in this case, the community has 13 members. 4 people want to leave for Yom Noraim. It's going to cost $500 to hire somebody to come to the community for Yom Noraim. So do you say you take 500 and divide it equally by 4? So the expense of the replacement person is borne equally by the 4 people who are leaving? Or do you do it according to means? Do you say, well, one of the guys who's leaving is rich. One of the guys who's leaving is dirt poor. Excuse me. Who says that the expense should be borne equally? Maybe a greater portion of the expense should be borne by the people who have greater means, and the people of lesser means should carry less of the expense. And in halacha, the way this is referred to is, do we go lefi nefashos? Do we divide the expense by the amount of people equally? Or do we go lefi mamon? Or do we go according to the monetary resources of the people who are being told that they need to carry the expense? So the Mechaber says something over here, and then the Mishnah Berurah is going to bring down that it's really a typo. So let's see what the Mechaber says. The Mechaber says 2 lines from the bottom near the beginning. He says like this: we just said that the people that are leaving have to carry the expense equally. Says the Mechaber, but v'im echad ani. Let's say there are 2 people who have to carry the expense. The town had 11 people, 2 are leaving, so 2 of them have to cover a $500 expense to get a replacement. V'im echad ani v'echad ashir. Let's say one of them is an ani. He's dirt poor. He doesn't have any resources. V'echad ashir, and the other one is rich. Says the Mechaber, peirin chetzyoy lefi mamain. What you do is you take the $500 expense and you divide it in half. 250, 250. 250 of it you divide lefi mamain. So the richer member of the community is going to cover a greater portion of that half of the expense. 250 of the $500 expense is going to be divided according to resources. So the richer person, let's say, is going to have to pay $200, and the poorer person is going to pay 50 of the first 250. The other 250, the chetzyoy lefi nefashos. The other 250 is divided equally 100 and a quarter and 100 and a quarter between the ani and the ashir. It's kind of like the House of Representatives and the Senate. The Senate, we have representatives that are divided equally amongst the 50 states. Every state gets 2 representatives in the Senate. The House of Representatives goes by population. A state has a greater population, they get more representatives. A smaller population, they get less representatives. So too over here, says the Mechaber. We have a $500 expense that has to be covered by 2 people. One of them is an ashir, one of them is an ani. You know what we're going to do? We're going to divide the expense in half. 250, 250. 250 of it we're going to divide according to monetary resources. The other 250 we're going to divide equally. Okay, so says the Mechaber. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut in Samaches. Ha'achrayim kasu the tas seferhu. The Achrayim write, and he brings this down from the Knesset Hakdolah and the Magen Avram, that this is a typo. Tebazeh peirin shneim b'shaveh. In this case, where the 2 people have to hire a stand-in for them, that cost is divided equally. Shekol echad mechuyev lahamin ishbim kaimai, because there's no reason why either person should get a break. Each one of them needs to hire somebody to replace them. Shemitchila hayaminyan shalem, because beforehand there was a minyan, ve'ein rashay levatel a minyan, and nobody has the right to be mevatel the minyan. So each one of you is leaving and being mevatel the minyan. Each one of you has a chiyuv to hire somebody to replace you. Now, because there are 2 of you, you get to divide the expense in half. But there's no reason that the ani should pay less. It's true that he has less monetary resources, but you want to leave, you got to find somebody to take your place. You're poor, you can't afford to pay a replacement. Don't go to mommy and tati for Yom Nerum. Stay home. So you shouldn't have the expense. Or maybe you'll make a cheshbon. If I go to mommy and tati, I don't have to make 2 briskets, and I don't have to make a suda mafsekes. So you know what? It's worth it for me to hire a stand-in. But whatever it is, if you make the decision to leave, then you're making the decision that you have to hire a stand-in. And there's no reason that that should be split in any other way than lefi nefashos. It should be split equally. When is there a case that we divide it in half, like the Mechaber says, and part of the expense is apportioned according to monetary resources? That's in a case where a community never had a minyan. The community only has 8 people. Now, now this community doesn't have a minyan. All year round, they don't have a minyan. Now the community wants to hire 2 people to bring in 2 people for Yom Neroim, so they should have a minyan. So now, the Oz Talia Gam Lefi Mammon. Now it's a communal expense. The community never had a minyan, and now the community wants to bring in a minyan. They want to hire 2 people. It's a communal expense. So now you're going to apportion that expense onto the whole community. So now the question is, how should you apportion it? Should you apportion it lefi nefashos, or should you apportion it lefi mammon? In that case, we go ahead and we divide it up, divide it in half, and do half lefi mammon and half lefi nefashos. And he gives a beautiful explanation to Chavetz Chaim. He says, "Da oz talya gam lefi mammon." Then it makes sense that at least part of the expense should be apportioned according to monetary resources. You know why? Says the Chavetz Chaim, because if a community only has 8 people, who says that they should stay and hire 2 people to make a minyan? Maybe they should all leave. Maybe they should all go away for Yom Neraim and find places where there is a minyan, where there are minyanim. Says the Chavetz Chaim, now it's going to depend if you're an usher or an ani. Says the Chavetz Chaim, and we have to think, I think, like Shtetlach and maybe pre-war Europe, olden days. The usher can't leave. You know why the usher can't leave? Because the usher has to stay in town and protect his material wealth. The usher is afraid if he leaves his house empty, he might be robbed. Or if he leaves, he has fields, he has crops, maybe he has sheep. I don't know. But if he leaves, his material wealth might be plundered. Let's remember what the Torah Kedusha tells us. The Torah Kedusha gives us a HaTorah that when we go to be Oil Regel, we don't have to be worried that marauders are going to come and take our material wealth. That's a HaTorah that the Rebbeinu Shalom gives us when we go to be Oil Regel. Over here it says the Chavetz Chaim, you have 8 people in town. The Ashirim don't want to leave because they're afraid to leave their stuff. The Ani, I don't have anything. So the Ani says, hey, don't put an expense on me. I'm very happy to leave for Yom Neraim. So the Aniyim have a valid argument why they shouldn't carry the full expense. So now we take half the expense and we apportion it in accordance with monetary resources. In the words of the Chavetz Chaim, bottom line, the Aniyim have no problem going somewhere else with his minyan. But for Hashirim, but the Ashirim, they don't want to leave because they don't want to leave their wealth unprotected. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We'll continue Mi'as Hashem next time. Thank you so much for joining me for Limud HaTorah. Discuss of Limud HaTorah should be begging against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua for his parnassus Shaduchim Tol Zinit, and we should be zeicher to see the Bias called Tzedek B'Meher V'Yameinu. Amen. Be well.